I want to talk about some of the best markets that are going to be coming up in the next 5 years where you can actually put your money in and that you know you're going to get a return on investment. If you're going to buy a property in Perth, Brisbane or Adelaide, stop right now. And here's why. Brisbane has grown by 76% in the last 5 years. Adelaide has grown by 100% in the last 5 years. And Perth has grown by 80% in the last 5 years. When you hear these numbers, do you stop and think to yourself, awesome, I'm going to get into this market because it's high growth, it's on fire, I can buy a property, I know it's going to get 10, maybe 20%, and I'm going to be able to use that equity and buy another property? Or do you think to yourself, hang on a sec, this market's done so well for so long now that potentially it's not going to keep this up and it's going to slow down and I might be buying at the top of the market. When you're making a decision, you've got to make sure it's not an irrational decision. You want to make sure you're understanding what the market's doing, the cycle that you're in. Are you buying at the top of the market or are you buying at the bottom of the market or are you buying in the middle of the market? Because this is going to dictate your next purchase. If you buy at the very top and then that market there starts to slow down and it stops growing, then you can't use that equity anymore because there's no equity to pull out of that property to get into your next property. Making sure that you're acting irrational is the most important thing when you're making a calculated decision. Now, property is a game of long-term investment. But at the same time, it's not just buying a property anywhere and saying, hey, I'm going to wait 20 years, 30 years, because that's not going to get you to your goal. You need to have a strategy to show you how to get to the next property ASAP. If you're in the accumulation phase of buying multiple properties to get you to your goal, you want to make sure the quicker you get into those properties, the faster you can rest at the end and then let the properties do all the heavy lifting and relax and then get to that goal in a short period of time. No one wants to get to their goal in 30 years' time. They want to get to their goal ASAP. And I'm like that also. We know Victoria's been the worst performing state across the country. In the last 5 years, it's been the worst performing for a number of reasons. And we're seeing prices actually going backwards in the last few years. If you look at COVID prices, at the high end of COVID, Melbourne prices and just in general, Victorian prices were at an all-time high. And then since then, there are prices in certain particular areas that are lower than COVID prices. So this means that you can actually get a property now that the market has gone back and that when the market reduces and prices go down, what happens? Your rental yields go up, meaning that the property's not going to cost you as much to hold per year because the rents have gone up or because the purchase prices have gone down. So you actually get the best of both worlds here. But more importantly, why am I saying Victoria? Why am I saying this is the place that you want to be? There's a number of reasons why. So we can touch on just Melbourne. You can still get property for around $700,000 in Melbourne on the west or north side of Melbourne. And so if you're looking for a great investment with a low purchase price, but of course with a decent yield, there's some attractive areas. But not just that, you've got some of the biggest regional towns in the country, places like Geelong, Ballarat, Bendigo, and the list goes on. With these places, they attract Australian citizens that are migrating all over the country to certain locations. But more importantly, why are people wanting to get into the Victorian market? And that's a great question. There are a number of reasons of what's going on. The federal and the state government have elected budgets towards the Victorian state. And of course, what they're trying to do is fuel the economy. Victoria has the highest level of debt. And when you have the highest level of debt, you need to pay that debt back. It's pretty simple. How do you do that? By making sure you can create jobs, fueling the economy, making sure you can get the state out of debt by being productive. Okay, and in the last 5 years, it hasn't been productive. The longest lockdowns, we had COVID-19, it wasn't the place to be. And since then, the market's had a real negative connotation towards what happened back then. So everything changes. There's cycles. In 2012 to 2017, we had Melbourne, Sydney, and Hobart on fire when the rest of the country, like Adelaide, Brisbane, Perth, and the list goes on, they were going backwards. And you can look at the data for yourself. So that would have been the worst time to buy a property in Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide in 2012. But it was the best time to buy in Melbourne and Sydney. But fast forward, 2020, COVID-19 happens. No, don't worry about COVID. It wasn't because of COVID, but 2020, you looked at Perth, Brisbane, Adelaide, were on fire. What were Melbourne and Sydney doing? We did see some price growth. We did see markets increasing in value. Once COVID vanished, we started to see a different story. We started to see Melbourne retracting in prices, same goes with Sydney, and we started to see the exodus of people leaving these states and migrating to Queensland, South Australia, and WA. But let's get back to Victoria. There's a lot of money getting spent on projects, and with projects, it does two things. There's money spent, so it creates projects. Two, it creates jobs, and with jobs, it creates internal migration. And with internal migration, it strengthens the economy because of productivity. So with this is the most important thing, looking at, okay, what projects are coming into Victoria and where are those projects going? The most important thing. There's going to be projects across the state, in regional towns and in capital cities. But let's have a look at some of the money getting spent. They are planning to spend $30 to $45 billion over the next 30 years. They're going to spend $17 to $24 billion on transportation. They're going to spend anywhere from $10 billion or more on hospitals. They're going to spend $1.6 to $2.2 billion on planning and designing and productivity. They're going to be spending another $5 to $10 billion on renewable energy projects. So really, when you look at this list, okay, and the money that they're spending over the next 30 years, that's great. But I want to bring it back. I want to bring it back to the next 5 years. And that's where, if you look into the data, there are projects and things happening like new hospitals, new schools, there's new renewable energy projects, and there's a whole bunch of other things going on in the state. So why do I think Victoria is going to be a great place to invest? Not because land tax, not because it's high stamp duty, it's because of property fundamentals. They're things that people are running away from Victoria because of those reasons, but I think it's a great opportunity. When people like to run away because of land tax or because of high stamp duty, it just makes it a more of an attractive place to invest down the track, because everyone else is worrying about the little petty things but not thinking about the bigger picture things. So if we have a look what's going on in Victoria, okay, in the last 12 months, okay, we've had about an influx of 30,000 people of internal migration. What does that actually mean? It means that there's 30,000 people that are Australian citizens that have come from different parts from Australia and have migrated to Victoria. But if we go back 2 years prior, there was about 24,500 people. So that's a 10% increase. When you compare 24,500 people versus 30,000 people the year after, that's a 10% increase in internal migration, which is ginormous. But where are those people going? That's the question. And they're going all over the place. And there's certain areas that you want to be targeting that are going to give you the growth, but as well the rental growth as well, to make sure that you get a property that's going to grow in the right trajectory. Now, not just that, there's a few things that are going on also. If we have a look back in the day, Melbourne was ranked as the #1 livable city, okay, which actually holds a lot of weight. From 2011 to 2017, it was ranked #1 in the world. If we look in 2024, got ranked 4th in the world for livable city, which is fantastic, but I do think there's going to be a comeback. The reason why I say that is because if we have a look at overseas migration, majority of the overseas migrants are coming to Melbourne. Now, Melbourne, if we have a look, in the last 5 years, Melbourne's been the worst capital city to invest in. Melbourne has had the biggest influx of overseas migration. Now, think about this. 70% of migrants that come to Australia can't afford to buy a home for the first 5 years, okay? Now, in 2022, 2023, we had over 500,000 people come to Australia, and majority of them went to Melbourne and Sydney. It was the biggest influx of overseas migration in the last 50 years. So what's this actually mean? 70% of them can't buy a home, correct. But what's going to happen in the next 5 years? Some of these people are going to need a place to live. And that number of 500,000 people coming in to Australia, that has been continuing that trend. The following year after that, 2023 to 2024, we had roughly over 400,000 people come to Australia. And once again, majority of those people came to Melbourne. Now, in saying that, majority of those people don't just come to Melbourne. Of course, they have to get elected to go to regional towns. And some of these regional towns are where? In Victoria. And so, with that, I'm looking at this data and looking at this information that we're going to see a trend of overseas migration helping with the fueling of the market 5 years down the track. But not just that, internal migration, people are coming back to Victoria when once upon a time in 2020, 2021, majority of the people leaving Victoria were going to Queensland and other states, which was affecting the property market. So if I was going to put my money somewhere, For me, I've already put it in Victoria. And I know where it's going to be heading. And I know one day the tides are going to change and you're going to look at Victoria as a place to be for property fundamentals, for people migrating there, and very, very low level of listing of properties, meaning that there's not many properties on the market advertised for sale, but also for rent. So before we go, I just want to talk about the last 5 years, what has happened in Victoria. It's had the most debt in the country, the worst performing property market in the country. Most of the internal migration left Melbourne, Victoria, and went to other states and territory. Land tax got increased, the highest level of stamp duty, and the list goes on. When you hear those things, it doesn't sound too attractive, but things will change because when a country or economy or a state is not doing so well, they don't want it to not do so well. They want it to change. And that's what the government's trying to do right now. And so with all the things going on at the moment, we do see that the future looks bright for Victoria. And once again, I'm going to leave this with you to make an informed decision, to do your own research, to go out there, understand what's going on in the market. Have a look at Victoria, have a look at New South Wales, have a look at Tasmania, have a look at Queensland, have a look at WA, have a look at the best property markets that have been the best property markets in the last 5 years, and understand why they have been the best property markets in the last 5 years, and then compare that information to the other states and territories, and then you can make an informed decision. This video here isn't to persuade you to say, hey, you should be investing in Victoria. It's to tell you about opening up your mind, looking at what's going on in different states and territories, and have a look at Victoria because it can be the place that might be perfect for you, depending on your strategy and what you're looking for. If this is helpful for you, all I ask for you, please, is to like and comment or share this video because it means that you like this type of content and we'll do more of this content and we'll share this with you more frequently. But thank you again. I'll leave this with you and to your success.